Sarah Martinez pulled her hair back into a tight ponytail as she walked through the automatic doors of St. Mary's General Hospital. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting their familiar harsh glow across the linoleum floors she had walked countless times before. It was 10:45 p.m., and the night shift was about to begin. To everyone around her, Sarah was just another dedicated nurse who preferred working nights, someone who found peace in the quieter hours when the hospital settled into its nocturnal rhythm. But Sarah carried secrets that would have shocked her colleagues. Hidden beneath her scrubs and behind her gentle bedside manner was a past that belonged to a different world entirely. 8 years ago, she had been Petty Officer First Class Sarah Martinez, one of the few women to complete Navy SEAL training. She had served 3 tours in Afghanistan and 2 in Iraq, carrying an M4 carbine through some of the most dangerous territories on Earth. Her hands, which now gently checked IVs and administered medications, had once assembled and disassembled weapons in complete darkness, moved with lethal precision through enemy compounds, and saved the lives of her teammates under fire. The transition from military life to nursing had been deliberate. After losing 2 members of her unit in an IED explosion outside Kandahar, Sarah made a decision that surprised everyone who knew her. She wanted to save lives instead of taking them. She wanted to heal instead of harm. The Navy offered her advancement opportunities, chances to lead new recruits, and positions that would have advanced her military career significantly. Instead, she chose to walk away from everything she had worked toward and enrolled in nursing school. Her fellow nursing students never suspected that the quiet woman who excelled in trauma care scenarios had learned her skills in field hospitals under enemy fire. They never questioned why she remained so calm during medical emergencies or why she could work efficiently with minimal sleep. Sarah let them believe she was just naturally gifted at handling pressure. The truth was that compared to calling in airstrikes while wounded soldiers bled out around her, a busy emergency room felt almost peaceful. Tonight felt different though. As Sarah checked her assignment sheet, she noticed an unusual tension among the security guards. Tom Rodriguez, the head of hospital security, was speaking in hushed tones with the night supervisor. His hand kept drifting to his radio, and his eyes scanned the parking lot through the windows more frequently than usual. Sarah had developed an instinct for reading situations during her military years, and every sensor was telling her something was wrong. The hospital served a diverse community in downtown Chicago, and, while they occasionally dealt with difficult patients or family members, serious security threats were rare. St. Mary's had a reputation as a safe place, somewhere people came to heal and find peace during their most vulnerable moments. The emergency department saw its share of violence-related injuries, but the perpetrators rarely followed their victims to the hospital. Sarah made her way to the cardiac unit where she would be working. Her patients included Mr. Peterson, an elderly man recovering from bypass surgery who loved to tell stories about his days as a mechanic. There was also Maria Gonzalez, a young mother who had suffered a heart attack at 32 and was terrified about who would care for her children. Sarah had spent extra time with Maria during previous shifts, helping her understand her medications and teaching her about the lifestyle changes that would help prevent future cardiac events. As she reviewed the patient charts, Sarah noticed that bed 12 had a new admission. The chart showed Ahmed Hassan, a 28-year-old man admitted with chest pains that had turned out to be anxiety-related. What caught Sarah's attention wasn't the medical information but rather the notation that Mr. Hassan had requested no visitors and seemed unusually nervous about providing personal information. His emergency contact was listed as his mosque, which wasn't particularly unusual, but something about the combination of details triggered Sarah's trained instincts. The night progressed normally for the first few hours. Sarah administered medications, checked vital signs, and spent time reassuring anxious patients. Mr. Peterson was having trouble sleeping and wanted to talk about his late wife. Sarah sat with him for a few extra minutes, listening to him describe how they had met at a church dance 60 years ago. These moments reminded her why she had chosen nursing. In the military, her mission had been to neutralize threats and protect American interests. Here, her mission was simpler and somehow more profound, to provide comfort and healing to people during their most difficult moments. Around 2 a.m., things began to change. Sarah was in the medication room when she heard raised voices coming from the direction of the emergency department. Through the windows, she could see police cars arriving in the parking lot, their red and blue lights painting the walls in alternating colors. Tom Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom, asking all departments to remain alert and report any suspicious activity immediately. Sarah's military training kicked in automatically. She found herself assessing exits, noting the locations of potential cover, and mentally cataloging anything that could be used as a weapon if necessary. The feeling was so familiar that it was almost comforting, like putting on an old jacket that still fit perfectly. She realized how much she had missed the heightened awareness that came with potential danger, even as she hoped that whatever was happening would resolve peacefully. The charge nurse, Janet Williams, gathered the nursing staff together for a quick briefing. The police had informed them that they were investigating threats made against the hospital, possibly related to a patient who had been treated earlier that day. They weren't releasing details, but they wanted hospital staff to be extra vigilant about anyone who seemed out of place or asked unusual questions about hospital layouts or security procedures. Sarah volunteered to take extra rounds, checking on patients and making sure everyone was comfortable. What she was really doing was conducting reconnaissance, using skills she hadn't employed in civilian life. She moved through the halls with purpose, noting which rooms had clear sight lines to the nursing station, identifying potential choke points, and observing the behavior of the few visitors who remained in the building during late hours. When she checked on Ahmed Hassan, she found him awake and agitated. He claimed he couldn't sleep because of the noise from the police cars, but Sarah noticed that he seemed more interested in watching the activity outside than expressing concern about it. His body language was tense in a way that reminded her of soldiers preparing for combat. When she asked if he needed anything for anxiety, he declined but continued to watch her carefully, as if he was studying her movements and responses. The rest of her patients were settled for the night, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was building. During her military service, she had learned to trust her instincts even when she couldn't explain them logically. The atmosphere in the hospital felt like the moments before enemy contact, when experienced soldiers could sense an attack coming even before it appeared on radar or in intelligence reports. Around 4 a.m., the police presence increased. Sarah could see officers positioning themselves at various entrances to the hospital, and she noticed that some of them were carrying rifles rather than just sidearms. Whatever threat they were preparing for was serious enough to warrant tactical response protocols. She found herself calculating distances between her current position and various exits, identifying which routes would provide the most cover if evacuation became necessary. Dr. Rebecca Chen, the attending physician for the cardiac unit, approached Sarah during her 5 a.m. rounds. Dr. Chen was known for her calm demeanor and clinical expertise, but tonight she seemed unusually concerned. She asked Sarah to keep a close eye on all the patients and to report anything unusual immediately. She also mentioned that the hospital administration was considering implementing lockdown procedures if the situation outside escalated further. Sarah assured Dr. Chen that she would maintain close surveillance of the unit, and she meant it in ways the doctor couldn't possibly understand. Her SEAL training had taught her how to protect high-value targets in hostile environments, and she was already treating the cardiac unit as a sector to defend. She mentally assigned priority levels to each patient based on their mobility and medical needs, planning how she would move them to safety if evacuation became necessary. The final hour of her shift was approaching when Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. Through the window of room 12, she saw Ahmed Hassan sitting up in bed, but he wasn't watching the police activity outside anymore. Instead, he was focused on his phone, typing rapidly and occasionally looking toward the nursing station. More concerning was what she glimpsed when he shifted position, the outline of what appeared to be a weapon concealed beneath his hospital gown. Everything Sarah had learned during 8 years of military service told her that the threat everyone was preparing for wasn't coming from outside the hospital. It was already inside, and it was much closer than anyone realized. She faced a decision that would force her to choose between the quiet life she had built as a nurse and the warrior she had trained to be. The enemy wasn't approaching the hospital, the enemy was already here, and Sarah was the only person who had identified the immediate danger. As she watched Ahmed Hassan continue his suspicious activities, Sarah realized that her past was about to collide with her present in ways she had never anticipated. The skills she had hoped never to use again were about to become the only thing standing between her patients and a threat that none of them could see coming. The night shift nurse was about to become something much more dangerous, and there would be no going back to the simple life she had tried to build. Sarah's mind raced as she processed what she had observed. 8 years of military training had taught her to analyze threats quickly and develop response plans under pressure. Ahmed Hassan was positioned in a room that provided excellent visibility of the nursing station, the main hallway, and the elevator banks. If he was planning an attack, he had chosen his location strategically. She needed more information, but she also needed to act quickly if her suspicions were correct. Moving with the casual efficiency that had made her an excellent nurse, Sarah began what appeared to be routine patient checks. In reality, she was conducting a tactical assessment of the entire cardiac unit. She counted potential hostages, identified defensible positions, and located anything that could be used as makeshift weapons or defensive barriers. The supply closets contained medical equipment that could be repurposed if necessary, and she noted the locations of oxygen tanks that could create explosive hazards if damaged. Her first priority was gathering intelligence without alerting Hassan to her suspicions. Sarah approached room 12 with a medication cup and clipboard, maintaining the professional demeanor that had served her well during covert operations. Hassan looked up as she entered, and she immediately noticed the change in his eyes. Gone was the anxious patient who had been admitted earlier, in his place was someone with the cold, calculating gaze of a trained operative. "Good morning, Mr. Hassan," Sarah said, keeping her voice steady and professional. "I have your morning medications. How are you feeling?" Hassan studied her carefully before responding. "Much better, thank you. The chest pains have completely disappeared." His English was perfect, but Sarah detected traces of an accent that suggested extensive training in language modification. During her time in Afghanistan, she had learned to recognize when someone was working hard to conceal their origins. As she checked his vital signs, Sarah used the opportunity to scan for weapons more thoroughly. What she had glimpsed earlier was definitely real. Hassan had a compact pistol concealed beneath his hospital gown. More concerning was the small electronic device partially hidden under his pillow that looked suspiciously like a detonator. If he had explosives, the threat level had just escalated beyond anything the hospital security team was prepared to handle. "The police activity outside must be keeping you awake," Sarah mentioned casually, watching his reaction. Hassan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Yes, very concerning. Do you know what's happening?" The question was too eager, too interested. Sarah recognized interrogation techniques she had used herself during intelligence-gathering missions. Hassan wasn't just a patient, he was collecting information about hospital security protocols and police response procedures. "I'm sure it's nothing serious," she replied, maintaining her cover as an uninformed civilian. "The security team handles these things well." After completing the medication routine, Sarah excused herself and immediately began implementing emergency protocols. Her first step was to discreetly contact Tom Rodriguez using the secure communication system that connected the nursing stations with hospital security. She needed to relay her concerns without broadcasting them over standard radio channels that Hassan might be monitoring. Tom's response was immediate and professional. Within minutes, he appeared in the cardiac unit under the pretense of conducting routine security rounds. Sarah briefed him quickly, using terminology that would sound like normal medical discussion to anyone overhearing them. She explained her observations about Hassan's behavior, the concealed weapons, and her assessment of the threat level. Tom's military background made him the perfect person to understand Sarah's concerns. He had served as an Army Ranger before transitioning to civilian security work, and he immediately grasped the implications of having a potential hostile operative embedded within the hospital. Together, they developed a preliminary response plan that would allow them to neutralize the threat while minimizing risk to patients and staff. The challenge was that Hassan's position in room 12 made him impossible to isolate without him realizing that his cover had been blown. The room's location meant that any approach would be visible to him well in advance, giving him time to activate whatever plan he was implementing. Additionally, if he had explosives, any attempt to take him down forcefully could result in massive casualties throughout the cardiac unit. Sarah volunteered to maintain close surveillance while Tom coordinated with the police tactical team outside. Her nursing duties provided perfect cover for staying near Hassan while gathering additional intelligence about his capabilities and intentions. She also began quietly preparing the other patients for potential evacuation, using medical pretenses to check their mobility and readiness to move quickly if necessary. Dr. Chen arrived for morning rounds earlier than usual, having been briefed by hospital administration about the increased security concerns. Sarah pulled her aside and explained the situation using clinical language that would sound routine to anyone listening. Dr. Chen's response demonstrated the professionalism that had made her an excellent physician. She immediately understood the gravity of the situation and began implementing medical protocols that would support tactical operations if they became necessary. Around 6 a.m., Hassan's behavior changed significantly. He began making phone calls in what Sarah recognized as Arabic, speaking in low tones that suggested he was receiving final instructions or confirming timing for some kind of operation. His body language became more tense, and he started paying closer attention to the movement of staff members throughout the unit. Sarah realized that whatever Hassan was planning was entering its final phases. She needed to act soon, but she also needed to maintain her cover long enough to gather enough intelligence to prevent a larger attack. During her SEAL training, she had learned that individual operatives rarely worked alone. Hassan was likely part of a larger cell that was coordinating multiple aspects of an attack on the hospital. The morning shift was beginning to arrive, which meant more potential civilians in danger but also more resources available for response operations. Sarah coordinated with Tom to position the incoming staff in ways that would support tactical operations while appearing to follow normal hospital routines. They also began quietly moving the most vulnerable patients away from room 12, using medical justifications that wouldn't arouse Hassan's suspicions. At 7 a.m., Sarah's shift was officially supposed to end, but she volunteered to stay for additional hours due to the increased patient load. This decision would prove crucial, because at 7:15 a.m., Hassan finally revealed his true intentions. Sarah was conducting what appeared to be a routine vital signs check when she noticed him activating the electronic device she had identified earlier. "Stop right there," Hassan said quietly, his voice now carrying the authority of someone accustomed to giving orders in life and death situations. "Step away from the call button and keep your hands where I can see them." Sarah complied, but she also activated emergency protocols she had prepared during her surveillance. Using hand signals that Tom would recognize from their earlier coordination, she indicated through the window that the situation had escalated to active threat status. Hassan was now openly holding the detonator, and Sarah could see that he had additional weapons concealed in the bed. "What do you want?" Sarah asked, maintaining her role as a frightened nurse while mentally preparing for combat operations. Hassan smiled coldly. "You're going to help me send a message that will make your government reconsider its policies in the Middle East. This hospital treats American soldiers who have killed innocent people in my country. Today, those people will face justice." The pieces of his plan became clear to Sarah immediately. Hassan intended to use the cardiac unit as a staging ground for a terrorist attack that would target not just the current patients, but also any military personnel who might be receiving treatment elsewhere in the hospital. The explosives he carried were likely just the beginning. He was probably coordinating with additional operatives positioned throughout the facility. Sarah realized that her unique background made her the only person in the hospital capable of stopping Hassan before he could implement his plan. Her nursing colleagues were trained to save lives, not to engage in combat operations. The police tactical team outside was preparing for external threats, not for a hostage situation involving medical patients who couldn't be evacuated quickly. "I need you to call the nursing station," Hassan continued, "and tell them that room 12 is implementing isolation protocols due to a contagious disease outbreak. That will keep other staff away while we wait for the rest of my team to arrive." This was the moment when Sarah had to choose between maintaining her civilian cover and revealing capabilities that would expose her military background. Hassan was giving her direct orders that would facilitate a terrorist attack on innocent people. Everything she had learned during SEAL training told her that this was the moment to strike, but doing so would require her to abandon the peaceful life she had built and become a warrior once again. As Hassan waited for her compliance, Sarah made calculations that drew on both her military experience and her medical knowledge. She knew the layout of the cardiac unit better than anyone, understood the medical needs of every patient, and possessed combat skills that Hassan couldn't possibly anticipate. The element of surprise was her greatest advantage, but she would only have one opportunity to use it effectively. The night shift nurse was about to disappear forever, replaced by the Navy SEAL who had been hiding beneath scrubs and a gentle bedside manner. Sarah Martinez was ready to engage the enemy, and, this time, the battlefield was a place she had sworn to protect. The moment Hassan looked away to check his phone for what appeared to be coordination messages, Sarah moved. 8 years of SEAL training exploded into action as she lunged forward with precision that surprised even her. Her left hand struck Hassan's wrist, sending the detonator flying across the room, while her right hand went for the pistol he had concealed beneath his hospital gown. The movement was fluid, practiced, and executed with the kind of lethal efficiency that had kept her alive through multiple combat deployments. Hassan was clearly trained in hand-to-hand combat, but he had made the fatal mistake of underestimating his opponent. As he tried to recover his weapon and call for backup, Sarah demonstrated why she had been one of the elite warriors in the most selective military unit in the world. She used a joint lock technique to control his gun hand while simultaneously applying pressure to nerve clusters that temporarily paralyzed his ability to resist. "Tom, we have active threat contained in room 12, Sarah spoke into her communication device, her voice calm and professional despite the life and death struggle she had just concluded. "Subject is neutralized, but expect additional hostiles throughout the facility." The transformation from gentle nurse to deadly operative was so complete that Hassan stared at her in shock even as she secured his weapons and applied restraints using modified medical tubing. "Who are you?" he gasped, unable to reconcile the woman who had been checking his vital signs with the warrior who had just dismantled his entire operation in under 30 seconds. "Someone who takes patient safety very seriously," Sarah replied, her tone carrying the cold authority of someone accustomed to life and death decisions. She quickly searched Hassan for additional weapons and found a smartphone that contained text messages confirming her worst fears. The cardiac unit was just one target. Hassan's cell had positioned operatives throughout St. Mary's Hospital, and the attack was scheduled to begin in less than 10 minutes. Sarah's military training kicked into high gear as she analyzed the intelligence she had just captured. The messages revealed positions of at least 4 additional hostiles, one in the emergency department, one near the pediatric ward, one in the main lobby, and another in the hospital's administrative offices. Each operative was armed with both conventional weapons and explosive devices, suggesting a coordinated attack designed to maximize casualties and create widespread terror. Tom arrived with 2 police officers who had been positioned as backup, but Sarah was already moving beyond the immediate threat. "We have a multi-target situation," she briefed them rapidly, showing them the messages on Hassan's phone. "For additional hostiles, coordinated timing, explosives involved." The external police presence was probably intended to contain responders while the internal attack proceeded. The police officers looked stunned by both the intelligence and the sight of Sarah, still dressed in scrubs, officially securing a terrorist operative who had been completely subdued. Tom, however, recognized immediately that Sarah possessed capabilities that went far beyond normal civilian training. "What's your background?" Tom asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. "Navy SEAL, 3 tours Afghanistan, 2 Iraq," Sarah replied without hesitation. The time for maintaining civilian cover had passed. Now she needed to use every skill she possessed to protect the hundreds of innocent people throughout the hospital. "I can help neutralize the remaining threats, but we need to coordinate with your tactical teams and evacuate vulnerable patients simultaneously." Dr. Chen, who had been monitoring the situation from the nursing station, approached with a combination of amazement and professional concern. "Sarah, are you telling me you're military?" "Former military," Sarah corrected. "Current nurse who happens to have specialized training in exactly this kind of situation." She was already formulating a tactical plan that would leverage her knowledge of the hospital layout, her understanding of the medical needs of various patients, and her combat experience. "Dr. Chen, we need to implement emergency protocols for patient evacuation while I work with security to neutralize the remaining threats." The next few minutes required precise coordination between medical and tactical operations. Sarah used her insider knowledge of hospital procedures to identify the safest evacuation routes for each department while simultaneously planning approaches to each hostile position that would minimize civilian casualties. Her SEAL training had prepared her for exactly this kind of complex operation where protecting non-combatants was as important as eliminating threats. The emergency department was the most challenging target because it contained the highest concentration of vulnerable patients who couldn't be moved quickly. Sarah coordinated with Tom to create a diversion that would draw the hostile away from patient areas while she approached from an unexpected direction. Using service corridors that most hospital staff didn't even know existed, she was able to position herself behind the operative before he realized the attack had been compromised. The takedown was swift and professional. Sarah's approach was so quiet that nearby medical staff didn't even realize a threat had been eliminated until she was securing the operative's weapons and calling for backup. The hostile had been positioned to target first responders who would arrive to treat casualties from the other attacks, but Sarah's intervention prevented him from implementing that aspect of the plan. The pediatric ward presented different challenges because the presence of children required absolute precision in any tactical response. Sarah couldn't risk any collateral damage that might harm the youngest patients, so she opted for a psychological approach rather than direct confrontation. Using her medical credentials to gain access to the area, she was able to identify the hostile operative and coordinate with hospital security to isolate him before he could threaten any children. The operative in the main lobby was neutralized by the police tactical team, guided by intelligence that Sarah had gathered from Hassan's communications. Her ability to read Arabic, learned during her deployments, allowed her to provide real-time translation of the coordination messages that the terrorist cell was using to synchronize their attack. The final hostile, positioned in the administrative offices, proved to be the most dangerous because he had positioned himself near the hospital's central computer systems. His mission appeared to be disrupting emergency communications and preventing effective coordination of response efforts. Sarah reached his position just as he was preparing to activate explosive devices that would have disabled the hospital's entire communication infrastructure. The confrontation was brief but intense. The operative was skilled and well-prepared, but he couldn't match Sarah's combination of combat training and intimate knowledge of the hospital environment. She used medical equipment creatively, turning an 4-pole into a weapon and using her knowledge of the building's layout to control the engagement space in ways that gave her tactical advantages. As the last hostile was secured, Sarah found herself standing in the administrative office, still wearing her nursing scrubs but having just completed a counter-terrorism operation that had saved hundreds of lives. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had left military service to become a healer, only to discover that her warrior skills were still necessary to protect the innocent people she now served as a nurse. Tom and the police tactical team leader found her there, coordinating with Dr. Chen to ensure that all hospital operations could resume safely. "Ma'am," the tactical team leader said, "I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like what you accomplished tonight. The coordination, the precision, the way you protected civilians while neutralizing multiple threats, that was textbook special operations work." Sarah looked around at the hospital that had become her battlefield, thinking about the patients she had protected and the colleagues who had trusted her to keep them safe. "I came here to save lives," she replied. Tonight, that just required different tools than usual. But, even as she spoke, Sarah realized that the night's events had changed everything. Her secret was now known to multiple people, and there would be questions about how a nurse had acquired the skills to single-handedly defeat a terrorist cell. More importantly, she had to confront the reality that her past would always be part of who she was, no matter how much she tried to build a different future. The transformation from nurse to warrior and back to nurse had revealed something important about Sarah's identity. She wasn't just a former SEAL who had become a nurse, or a nurse who happened to have military training. She was someone who had found a way to serve others using every skill she possessed, whether that meant providing comfort to cardiac patients or eliminating threats to innocent lives. As dawn broke over Chicago, Sarah prepared to face the consequences of a night that had forced her to reveal capabilities she had hoped never to use again. The quiet life she had built was over, but perhaps it was time to embrace a new kind of service that honored both her military heritage and her commitment to healing. The aftermath of the terrorist attack brought a media storm that Sarah had never anticipated. By noon, news crews surrounded St. Mary's Hospital, and reporters were demanding interviews with the mystery nurse who had single-handedly prevented a coordinated terrorist attack. Hospital administration was overwhelmed by calls from federal agencies, military officials, and journalists who wanted to understand how a civilian healthcare worker had possessed the skills to neutralize multiple armed operatives. Sarah found herself in the unusual position of being both celebrated and scrutinized. FBI counterterrorism specialists arrived to debrief her, and their questions revealed just how sophisticated the terrorist plot had been. The cell that Hassan led had been planning the hospital attack for months, choosing St. Mary's specifically because it treated military personnel and first responders. Their goal had been to strike at symbols of American strength while maximizing civilian casualties to create widespread fear. "Miss Martinez," said Special Agent Rebecca Torres, the lead FBI investigator, "your intervention prevented what could have been one of the worst domestic terrorist attacks in recent memory. The intelligence we gathered from the operatives you captured has already led to arrests of additional cell members in 3 other cities." The FBI briefing revealed that Hassan's group was part of a larger network that had been planning simultaneous attacks on hospitals, schools, and government buildings across the Midwest. Sarah's quick thinking and decisive action had not only saved the lives of everyone in St. Mary's Hospital but had also disrupted a much broader terrorist campaign. Dr. Chen and the hospital nursing staff were struggling to process the revelation about Sarah's background. Many of her colleagues felt deceived, wondering how they had worked alongside someone with such extraordinary capabilities without ever suspecting her true identity. Others were amazed by the dedication she had shown to her nursing duties, understanding now that she had chosen to serve others through healing rather than continuing her military career. "I don't understand," said Janet Williams, the charge nurse who had worked closely with Sarah for 2 years. "You could have had any job you wanted with your military background. Why did you choose to work night shifts in a hospital cardiac unit?" Sarah's answer was simple but profound. "Because after spending years in places where people died, I wanted to be somewhere people got better. I wanted to use my hands to heal instead of harm." She paused, looking around at the cardiac unit where she had found peace until the previous night's violence. "I thought I could leave that other life behind completely, but last night taught me that sometimes you have to use every skill you have to protect the people you care about." The conversation was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. Admiral James Patterson, Sarah's former commanding officer, had flown in from Naval Special Warfare Command in Virginia. His presence immediately changed the atmosphere in the room, as Sarah snapped unconsciously into military posture despite wearing civilian clothes. "At ease, Martinez," Admiral Patterson said with a slight smile. "I'm here as a friend, not as your former CO." He looked around at the hospital environment where Sarah had made her new life. "I have to say, when I heard about what happened here, I wasn't entirely surprised. You always were the most dedicated operator I ever commanded." Admiral Patterson explained that news of Sarah's actions had reached the highest levels of military command. The Navy was proud of her service both in uniform and as a civilian, and they wanted to offer her opportunities to return to active duty in roles that would utilize her unique combination of medical training and special operations expertise. "We're developing new programs for medical personnel who can operate in hostile environments," the Admiral explained. "Combat medics with your capabilities could save countless lives in special operations missions. You could serve your country again while using both your nursing skills and your military training." The offer was tempting, but Sarah found herself conflicted. Her patients in the cardiac unit had become like family to her. Mr. Peterson, who had survived his heart surgery and was now recovering well, had already told her that she was his favorite nurse. Maria Gonzalez had credited Sarah with helping her understand her condition and giving her hope for the future. These relationships represented a different kind of service, one that was equally important to her sense of purpose. Tom Rodriguez provided unexpected perspective on Sarah's dilemma. As a former Army Ranger who had transitioned to civilian security work, he understood the challenge of finding meaningful service outside the military. "Sarah, what you did last night proved something important," he said. "You don't have to choose between being a warrior and being a healer. You can be both." The hospital administration, led by CEO Michael Chen, Dr. Chen's brother, offered Sarah a unique opportunity that would allow her to combine her skills in a new way. They proposed creating a position for her as Director of Emergency Security Operations, a role that would involve training hospital staff in crisis response procedures while continuing her nursing duties. The position would prepare St. Mary's and other healthcare facilities to better protect patients and staff in an increasingly dangerous world. Healthcare facilities are becoming targets, CEO Chen explained. We need professionals who understand both medical operations and security protocols. You could help us protect not just our patients, but patients in hospitals throughout the region. The proposal represented something Sarah had never considered, a way to serve others that honored both her military training and her medical career. She would be able to continue providing direct patient care while also developing systems that would protect healthcare workers and patients from the kinds of threats that had nearly devastated St. Mary's. Federal agencies also expressed interest in Sarah's unique qualifications. The Department of Homeland Security offered her a position developing security protocols for healthcare facilities, while the Centers for Disease Control proposed that she help create response teams for medical emergencies in hostile environments. Each opportunity represented a chance to serve on a larger scale, using lessons learned from both her military service and her civilian nursing experience. After several days of consideration, Sarah made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She chose to remain at St. Mary's Hospital, accepting the new role as Director of Emergency Security Operations while continuing to work night shifts in the cardiac unit. The decision reflected her understanding that she had found her true calling in the intersection between protection and healing. I spent 8 years learning how to eliminate threats, Sarah explained to Admiral Patterson during their final meeting. I've spent the last 4 years learning how to heal people. What happened here showed me that both skills are necessary to truly serve others. Her new role allowed Sarah to travel to other hospitals, teaching healthcare workers how to identify and respond to security threats while maintaining their primary focus on patient care. She developed training programs that helped medical staff recognize potential dangers without becoming paranoid, and created response protocols that protected patients while allowing medical operations to continue during emergencies. The cardiac unit patients welcomed Sarah's return with enthusiasm. Mr. Peterson had saved newspaper clippings about her heroism, and Maria Gonzalez credited Sarah's example with inspiring her own recovery. New patients were initially intimidated by Sarah's reputation, but they quickly discovered that her primary identity remained that of a caring nurse who happened to possess extraordinary capabilities. 6 months after the terrorist attack, Sarah received a letter from Hassan, who was serving a life sentence in federal prison. In it, he expressed respect for her skills and acknowledged that he had underestimated both her capabilities and her dedication to protecting innocent people. The letter ended with an unexpected statement: "You showed me that true strength comes from choosing to heal rather than harm, even when you possess the power to destroy." Sarah kept the letter as a reminder of the choice she had made to use her capabilities in service of life rather than death. She had learned that being a warrior and being a healer were not contradictory identities but rather complementary aspects of a life dedicated to protecting and serving others. The night shift at St. Mary's Hospital continued much as it always had, with Sarah moving quietly through the halls checking on patients and providing comfort during their most vulnerable hours. But now, both she and her colleagues understood that her gentle bedside manner was backed by the knowledge and capability to protect them from any threat that might emerge from the darkness. Sarah Martinez had found a way to honor both her military service and her civilian calling, proving that the most effective way to serve others often requires using every skill and capability you possess. The night shift nurse remained dedicated to healing, but she was also ready to be a warrior whenever protection was needed. In the end, she had discovered that her true identity encompassed both roles, and that the best way to serve others was to be fully prepared to keep them safe while helping them heal.